My wife ditched me weeks after our wedding for her dying ex, but I knew something was fishy. I'm Ethan, a 30-year-old from Seattle, blindsided when Emma left me for Mark, claiming he had terminal cancer. I doubted his story from the start, but the truth was worse than I imagined. In May 2025, Emma came back, pregnant with my child, revealing Mark's sick lie that tore us apart. Watch this true infidelity story to see how my suspicions led to a devastating betrayal. Can a marriage survive this kind of deception? Some betrayals don't just break your heart. They rip apart everything you thought you knew about love. I'm Ethan, a 30-year-old project manager from Seattle, Washington, and I thought I'd found my forever with Emma until she left me weeks after our wedding for her dying ex. I'll never forget the day I met Emma. It was back in October 2019 at my buddy Phil's barbecue in his backyard out in Bellevue, just a short drive from the city. I almost didn't go. Work had been a total nightmare that week, juggling deadlines and a new client who wouldn't stop changing their mind. All I wanted was to crash on my couch with a cold IPA and zone out to some football. But Phil kept texting me, saying I needed to get out more, that he'd been trying to set me up with someone new ever since my last relationship crashed and burned. I'd been single for about a year after my ex, Lauren, and I called it quits. She wanted to move to LA for her influencer career, and I wasn't about that long-distance life. I finally gave in, figuring I'd show up for an hour, grab a burger, and head home. But the moment I saw Emma, something just clicked. She was helping Phil's girlfriend, Sarah, set up the food table, laughing at some dumb joke Phil made about his grilling skills. Her smile lit up the whole yard. She was wearing this casual blue sundress, looking so natural, not like the high-maintenance types Phil usually tried to set me up with.
I walked over and we got to talking about how we both can't stand barbecue chicken. Kind of funny for a barbecue, right? We ended up chatting for 3 hours straight. The kind of conversation that just flows, like we'd known each other forever. She told me she was a pediatric nurse at Seattle Children's Hospital, and I could tell right away she had a big heart. After that, we were pretty much inseparable. We started dating officially 2 weeks later, and Emma was everything I'd ever wanted in a partner. Smart, she always had these stories about her patients that made me admire her even more. Funny, she had this quirky sense of humor, always cracking me up with her impressions of the doctors she worked with. Beautiful, but in a natural way, not high maintenance. We just clicked on every level. Same values, same dreams, even the same guilty pleasure for reality TV. 90 Day Fiancé was our go-to. We'd binge it on weekends, laughing our butts off at the drama, while eating takeout from our favorite Thai spot downtown. Over the next 5 years, we built a solid relationship. We didn't have those dramatic fights you see on TV. No trust issues, no petty arguments, none of that nonsense. Sure, we had our disagreements, like when I forgot to tell her I'd be late for dinner because of a work meeting, but we always worked through them like adults. My buddies used to razz me for being whipped. Phil would say I was one of those guys who'd drop everything for his girl. But honestly, I was just happy. Emma made me want to be a better man, as cheesy as that sounds. Fast forward to October 2024. I proposed during a hiking trip in the Cascades, about an hour outside Seattle. Emma's only been into outdoor stuff, and I knew she'd love a proposal with a view of Mount Rainier in the background. I was so nervous I almost dropped the ring off the trail, nearly gave myself a heart attack. But she said yes, crying and laughing at the same time.
We started planning the wedding right away. Emma had always dreamed of getting married at this historic vineyard in Woodinville, about 30 miles from the city. It cost a pretty penny, $15,000 just for the venue and catering, but seeing how happy it made her was worth every cent. The wedding was in March 2025, and man, it was perfect. I'm not just saying that because I dropped a small fortune on it. Seriously, why are weddings so dang expensive? The vineyard looked straight out of a postcard, all decked out with string lights and white roses everywhere. Emma was a vision in her dress, glowing as she walked down the aisle. I remember watching her that night, laughing with her bridesmaids on the dance floor and thinking how lucky I was. This incredible woman actually chose to spend her life with me. It felt like a dream. We had big plans after the wedding. We wanted to travel more, maybe hit up Japan next year for cherry blossom season. We talked about buying a house in the suburbs by 2026, something with a big yard for our future kids and our dog Max to run around in. Emma even had names picked out. She wanted to name our first son after her grandpa, Henry, which I was totally cool with. If someone had told me then what was about to happen, I would have laughed in their face. How could anything go wrong? We were rock solid. Or at least, I thought we were.
After the wedding, we jetted off to Santorini, Greece for our honeymoon. It was amazing. Whitewashed buildings, crystal clear waters, the works. We spent our days exploring, eating way too much baklava, and just soaking in every moment as newlyweds. I'd never seen Emma happier. She'd post these cute selfies of us on Instagram with captions like, "Happily ever after starts here." But 2 weeks after we got back, in early April 2025, everything fell apart. It was a Friday night, and I was at home grilling some fancy ribeye steaks I'd splurged on, $60 a pop from this upscale butcher shop in Pike Place Market. Emma loves a good steak dinner, and I wanted to surprise her since she'd been pulling 12-hour shifts at the hospital lately. She was supposed to be home by 6 p.m., but she texted saying she was grabbing a quick coffee with her best friend Ashley after work. Now, Ashley's always been a bit of a drama queen, not my favorite person, to be honest. She's the type who's always stirring up trouble and playing innocent about it. But she'd been Emma's best friend since college, so I tried to roll with it. By 8:30, the steaks were getting cold and Emma still wasn't home. I was starting to get annoyed and hungry as heck, but I figured they'd gotten caught up talking. Emma finally walked in around 9 p.m., and the second she did, I knew something was off. She had this look on her face, the kind she gets when she has to break bad news to parents in the hospital. Serious, almost detached. She didn't even notice the dinner I'd set up, just walked straight to the kitchen island and said, "We need to talk," in this tone I'd never heard her use with me before. My first thought was that maybe something happened at work, maybe one of her patients didn't make it. I'd have been okay with that. I'd have held her, let her cry it out, whatever she needed. But what she said next made me wish it had been that simple. She sat down and started telling me about her ex, Mark, someone she'd dated for 3 years in college, back before we met. I knew about him. She'd mentioned they broke up because he took a job in Boston and neither wanted to do long distance. It was ancient history. Or so I thought. Turns out, Ashley had run into Mark's brother at the gym earlier that week and found out Mark had stage 4 brain cancer, glioblastoma, the aggressive kind. Doctors gave him 6 months, tops. Emma had been texting Mark ever since, and while I was out dropping $120 on steaks, my wife was having deep conversations with her dying ex. The texts weren't even flirty. I almost wish they had been. It would have made what came next easier to deal with. They were just emotional. Lots of, "I never forgot about you," and "you were such an important part of my life" kind of stuff. The kind of conversations you probably shouldn't be having with an ex when you're a newlywed. Then Emma dropped the bomb. Mark's dying wish was to spend his last months with her. Facing death had apparently made him realize she was the one that got away, or some Hallmark movie nonsense like that. And Emma, God, this still stings. She said she felt like she had to do this, like it was some cosmic test from the universe. Worst part? Ashley had been egging her on the whole time, telling her it was fate, that she'd regret it forever if she didn't go to Mark in his time of need. Great advice for a newlywed, right? I just sat there, staring at our cold dinner, while my wife of 3 months told me she needed to go be with her ex. the same wife who'd been planning our future together just weeks ago, who still had a suitcase in our bedroom that wasn't fully unpacked from our honeymoon. Something about Mark's story didn't sit right with me. Why now, after all these years? But Emma wouldn't hear it. She looked at me like I was the bad guy for even questioning it. If this was a test, I was already failing.
I'm Ethan, a 30-year-old project manager from Seattle, Washington, and my perfect marriage to Emma was unraveling faster than I could wrap my head around. That Friday night in early April 2025, when Emma dropped the bomb about her ex, Mark, and his supposed stage 4 brain cancer, I felt like I'd been hit by a freight train. She sat there at our kitchen island, her voice steady but her eyes distant, talking about Mark's dying wish like it was some noble quest. "Mark has no one else," she kept saying, her words cutting deeper with every syllable. "His family's all on the East Coast. He's facing death alone, Ethan." Meanwhile, I'm sitting there staring at the cold ribeye steaks I'd grilled for us, $120 down the drain, thinking, what about me? What about your husband, who you just promised forever to like 3 weeks ago? I could barely process it. My wife of less than a month was telling me she needed to go be with her ex because he was dying. I tried to keep my cool at first, I really did. I asked her straight up if she still had feelings for Mark. She started crying. Emma always cries when she's stressed, and usually I'd be the guy to hold her, tell her it'd be okay. But right then, it just made me angrier. She said it wasn't about that this was bigger than our relationship, that Ashley had helped her see it was something she needed to do to live with herself. Ashley, let's talk about her for a sec. She's been a pain in my side since day one. She's that perpetually single friend who's always meddling in everyone else's relationships, the type who posts those cheesy follow your heart quotes on Instagram but can't keep a boyfriend longer than a hot minute. According to Emma, Ashley was the one who really pushed her into this whole mess. After running into Mark's brother at the gym, Ashley set up a chance meeting with Mark at their old coffee spot in Capitol Hill, the same place they used to go back in college. She'd been feeding Emma all this spiritual nonsense about how the universe brings people back into our lives for a reason, that sometimes first loves are meant to be last loves. Total garbage, if you ask me. I tried to be rational about it. I asked Emma if she'd seen any of Mark's medical records herself, if she'd talked to his doctors, if she'd even checked with his family to confirm his diagnosis. She got defensive real quick, saying she couldn't believe I'd questioned something like this, that the Mark she knew would never lie about something so serious. The Mark she knew. Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. What did that even mean? She hadn't seen this guy in years, and now she was acting like she knew him better than she knew me, her husband? It didn't add up. My gut was screaming that something was off. Why would a guy who'd been out of her life for so long suddenly need her now, right after we got married? It felt too convenient, too staged. But Emma wouldn't hear it. The more I pushed, the more she doubled down. She said I was being cold, that I didn't understand what it was like to know someone you loved was dying. I fired back, "I'm not the one being cold here, Emma. You're the one sitting here telling me you need to go be with your ex while I'm still trying to process our honeymoon photos." She actually expected me to be okay with this, like I should just be cool with my wife leaving me to go play nurse for her ex-boyfriend. She even suggested we could take a break while she helped Mark through his final journey. Her exact words, straight out of some sappy Lifetime movie.
I lost it at that point. I told her marriage doesn't have a pause button, that she couldn't just put our life on hold while she went to fulfill some dying guy's fantasy. I asked her how she'd feel if I left her for an ex who was dying. She said that was different, but couldn't explain why. Just kept crying and saying, I didn't get it. The conversation went in circles for hours.
Emma kept talking about karma and doing the right thing, while I tried to make her see how insane this whole situation was. At one point, she even said, "If you really love me, you'll understand why I need to do this." Classic manipulation right there, and I wasn't falling for it. Finally, around 2 a.m., I'd had enough. I told her she needed to make a choice right then and there. If she walked out that door to be with Mark, we were done. No breaks, no temporary separation, no coming back when she was finished playing Saint. Done. She looked at me like I was the one being unreasonable, talking about how life isn't black and white, how sometimes we have to make hard choices for the greater good. I cut her off and said, "Actually, this choice is pretty black and white. Either you're my wife or you're not." The way she looked at me then, I'll never forget it. It was this mix of disappointment and resignation, like I was the one failing some kind of test. She said she needed time to think, grabbed her purse, and left to stay at Ashley's apartment in Queen Anne. The sound of the door slamming behind her echoed in my head like a gunshot. I didn't sleep at all that night, just sat in our kitchen staring at those stupid expensive steaks, wondering how my life had turned into this ridiculous drama. I kept checking my phone, hoping she'd text me saying she'd come to her senses, that she'd chosen us. But deep down, I knew she'd already made her choice. Things moved fast after that. Emma stayed at Ashley's for a few days, barely responding to my texts. I tried calling her, but she'd either let it go to voicemail or give me one-word answers: busy, later, sorry. Meanwhile, I was going through hell. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, just kept replaying everything in my head, trying to figure out where I went wrong. My buddy Phil, the one who hosted the barbecue where we met, came over with a pizza from Zeke's when I told him what was going down. He couldn't believe it either. We'd all hung out together so many times, double dates to the Mariners games, group trips to Leavenworth for the Christmas lights, and Emma had always seemed so down to earth, not the type to pull a stunt like this. Phil kept saying, "Man, this doesn't sound right. You sure Mark's really sick? Sounds like a scam to me." I told him I asked the same thing, but Emma wouldn't listen. Then, about a week after she left, in mid-April 2025, I got a long text from Emma. She said she'd done a lot of thinking and decided she had to follow her heart. She was moving in with Mark to help him through his final months, renting a small apartment near his place in Ballard so she could be there for him. She actually wrote that she hoped I could find it in my heart to understand and that maybe we could revisit our relationship after Mark passed, like I was just gonna sit around waiting to be her backup plan. The next day, I got an email from her lawyer, not even a phone call, saying she wanted a divorce and hoped we could handle it amicably. I'll never forget sitting at my desk at work, staring at that email, feeling like I'd been sucker punched. I had to tell my boss I was coming down with something and went home early. Some of our friends actually took her side, saying I was being heartless and unsupportive. My friend Rachel, who I thought was my friend first, even told me I should be proud of Emma for being so selfless. Proud that my wife was leaving me for her ex? What kind of twisted logic is that? I remember this one dinner with our couple friends at a spot in Fremont. They tried to get me to see it from Emma's perspective, saying, "How would you feel if you knew you could give someone comfort in their final months, but chose not to?" I straight up asked them if either of them would leave their spouse for a dying ex. They got real quiet after that, just stared at their craft beers like they held the answers. The worst part was everyone treating me like I was the bad guy for not being okay with this. Like I was the jerk for expecting my wife to actually honor our marriage vows. Even Emma's sister, Lisa, who'd always been cool with me, started posting these vague Facebook statuses about how true love means supporting each other's tough choices or some nonsense like that. My doubts about Mark kept growing, but I had no way to prove anything. I thought about hiring a PI to dig into his story. Phil even offered to chip in, but I didn't want to stoop that low. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that this whole thing was off, that Mark was playing some kind of game. I just didn't know how right I was, or how much worse it was gonna get.
I'm Ethan, a 30-year-old project manager from Seattle, Washington, and the betrayal of my wife, Emma, had turned my life into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. After she left me in mid-April 2025 to support her ex, Mark, who claimed to have stage 4 brain cancer, I was a mess. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every day felt like a fight to keep my head above water. I'd always had my doubts about Mark's story. Something didn't sit right. Why would a guy who hadn't spoken to Emma in years suddenly need her so badly right after we got married? Why was Ashley, Emma's drama queen best friend, so quick to push her into this? I'd asked Emma to verify Mark's diagnosis, see his medical records, talk to his doctors, anything. But she'd brush me off, saying I was heartless for even questioning it. Those doubts ate at me, but I had no proof. Just a gut feeling that kept me up at night. I even thought about digging deeper myself, maybe reaching out to Mark's brother directly, but I didn't want to look like the crazy ex-husband. I leaned hard on my buddy Phil for support, the guy who had introduced me to Emma back at that barbecue in 2019. He'd come over with a pizza from Zeke's or a 6-pack of Rainier, trying to pull me out of the dark hole I'd fallen into, but nothing really worked. My dog, Max, was my real anchor. That lab mix kept me sane, forced me to stick to some kind of routine. I had to get up to walk him around Green Lake, had to be home by 7 p.m. to feed him. He'd sit with me on the couch while I binge-watched Netflix, probably wondering why I was watching so much Breaking Bad at 2 a.m.
I threw myself into work, picking up every extra project I could to keep my mind busy. My boss was cool about it, letting me take on more to distract myself, and I made some decent cash, enough to cover the lawyer fees from the divorce at least. Social media was a minefield. Emma didn't post much about her situation. Guess it's hard to make "left my husband for my dying ex" look good on Instagram. But mutual friends would share stuff. Pictures of her at brunch in Ballard, acting like everything was normal. Ashley's posts were the worst. All these cryptic quotes about following your heart and the universe has a plan. I had to block both of them eventually. I lost some friends in the split too. Couples we used to hang with started picking sides. Some thought I was a jerk for not supporting Emma's selfless choice, while others just felt awkward and stopped inviting me to trivia nights at the bar. That hurt almost as much as the divorce itself. My brother was my rock, though. He'd come over with his kids, dragging me to the zoo or the aquarium to get me out of the house. By early May 2025, I was starting to find my footing again. I got a promotion at work, bought a new truck, a Tacoma I'd always wanted, and I was in the best shape of my life thanks to Brazilian jiu-jitsu classes at a gym in Fremont. I even started dating a bit. Nothing serious, just casual dates with a girl named Amy from my gym. She teaches morning kickboxing classes, and she's the total opposite of Emma. Straightforward, no drama, doesn't buy into all that universe has a plan nonsense. We'd been seeing each other for a couple of weeks, and things were heading somewhere good. She was even coming over for dinner on May 26th, 2025.
That's when my world got flipped upside down. Again. I was at home, cooking dinner, grilling some salmon with a lemon herb glaze, Amy's favorite, when there was a knock at the door. I figured maybe Amy had shown up early, so I opened it with a smile. But it wasn't Amy. It was Emma. I hadn't seen her since she moved out a month ago, and she looked different, more tired, her eyes red like she'd been crying for days. And then I noticed it. She was pregnant, visibly pregnant, her hand resting on her belly, which was starting to show a small bump. My heart stopped. Pregnant? With
who? My mind immediately went to Mark. Had she been with him in that way while she was supposedly supporting him through his illness? The thought made my stomach churn. I'd heard of infidelity leading to pregnancies, but for her to come back to me pregnant, it didn't make sense. If she'd been unfaithful with Mark, how could this be my child? "Ethan," she said, her voice trembling, "we need to talk." I stepped aside, letting her in, my heart pounding as I braced myself for whatever she was about to say. She sat down on the couch, Max sniffing at her curiously before settling at my feet. She was clutching an envelope, her hands shaking like she was about to fall apart. "I'm 14 weeks along," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I did the math in my head. 14 weeks meant she got pregnant back in early February 2025, before she left me in April, before everything fell apart. That timeline pointed to me as the father, but I wasn't ready to believe her, not after what she'd done. My doubts about her, about Mark, about everything came rushing back. What if she'd been with Mark sooner than I thought? What if she'd been lying to me even before she left? 14 weeks? I said, my voice sharp with suspicion. How do I know it's mine, Emma? You left me for Mark. How do I know you weren't with him before you walked out? How do I know this isn't his kid? Her eyes widened, hurt flashing across her face, but I didn't back down. I couldn't let myself trust her without proof, not after she'd chosen Mark over me, not after she'd walked out on our marriage without even trying to verify his story. She handed me the envelope, a paternity test result from one of those early blood tests they can do during pregnancy.
"I had it done last week," she said, her voice cracking as tears welled up in her eyes. "I knew you'd need to see this. It's yours, Ethan. 99.9% probability." I scanned the paper, my hands trembling as the numbers stared back at me. 99.9%? It was my kid! The relief hit me first. I hadn't realized how much I'd been dreading the thought of her carrying Mark's child. But then the anger came rushing back, hotter than ever. She'd left me, betrayed me, and now she was standing here, pregnant with my baby, acting like that could erase everything. "So you're pregnant with my kid?" I said, my voice cold. "That doesn't explain why you left, Emma. That doesn't fix what you did." She broke down, tears streaming down her face as she explained everything. She'd found out she was pregnant just a couple of weeks ago, after cutting ties with Mark earlier that month. She hadn't suspected it at first. She'd been so caught up in Mark's supposed illness that she'd ignored the signs, the nausea, the fatigue, the missed periods. It wasn't until she started feeling sick and took a test, then another, that she confirmed she was pregnant. She'd gone to a doctor alone, still reeling from what she'd just discovered about Mark. Because Mark, he'd never been sick. Emma's voice shook as she told me how she'd found out. In early May 2025, Emma had run into Mark's sister at Whole Foods in downtown Seattle. They got to chatting, catching up, and when Emma mentioned Mark's treatment, his sister looked confused, saying she had no idea what Emma was talking about. The whole family thought Mark and Emma had just gotten back together normally. He'd never told them about faking cancer.
Emma confronted Mark that night at his apartment in Ballard, and the jerk just laughed, saying, "Yeah, I made it all up, but it worked, didn't it?" He'd been dating his co-worker Jessica for the past 6 months already and was planning to move to California with her for a new job. He looked Emma in the face and said, "I needed you back then, but I'm in a better place now. People change. You should move on too." I stood there in my living room, the paternity test still in my hand, trying to process it all. My suspicions had been right. Mark had been lying, just like I'd feared. He'd faked everything, the medical reports, the remote work during his supposed treatment, all of it. He'd even gotten a buddy who worked at a hospital to forge documents, making his lie look legit. It was a sick, twisted plan to steal Emma from me, and it had worked until it didn't. But knowing the truth about Mark didn't make Emma's actions any less painful. She'd still chosen him over me, still walked out on our marriage without even trying to verify his story. And now, here she was, carrying my child, begging for forgiveness like that could undo the damage. "Ethan," she said, her voice desperate, "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, but this baby, it's ours. Doesn't that mean something? Can't we try again for our child?" I shook my head, the anger and hurt too raw to let her words sink in.
"No, Emma," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "This baby means I'll be a father and I'll be there for our kid. I'll never walk away from that responsibility. But you and me, we're done. You made your choice when you left. You can't just come back now because Mark turned out to be a liar. A dad to a child I'd share with a woman I couldn't trust anymore." I told her to leave, that we'd figure out co-parenting later, but I needed space to think. She left still crying, saying she'd prove herself to me somehow. I sat back down with Max, my mind spinning. Amy was still coming over for dinner, and I hadn't even told her yet. I ended up texting her saying I wasn't feeling well and needed a rain check. How do you drop a bombshell like this on someone you're just starting to care about? My doubts had led me to the truth, but the truth didn't make things any easier. It only made them more complicated. I'm Ethan, a 30-year-old project manager from Seattle, and my world had just been turned upside down. Again. It was May 26, 2025, and Emma, my ex-wife who'd left me for her dying ex, Mark, stood in my living room, visibly pregnant with my child, dropping bombshell after bombshell. The paternity test confirmed it. I was the father, 14 weeks along, conceived back in February before she left me. But that wasn't even the craziest part. Mark had faked his terminal illness, a twisted scheme to win Emma back after seeing our wedding photos online. Emma had only found out earlier that month, cut him off, and now here she was, crying, begging for forgiveness, saying our baby could be a sign for us to start over. I stood there, the paternity test crumpled in my hand, my mind racing a mile a minute. Anger, betrayal, confusion, it all hit me at once. I couldn't even look at her without seeing the woman who'd walked on me, who'd chosen Mark without a second thought, who'd thrown away our marriage for a lie. My suspicions had been right all along, but that didn't make this any easier. It made it worse. "How could you do this to us, Emma?" I finally said, my voice shaking with rage. "You didn't even check his story. You just left me like our marriage meant nothing. And now you think a baby fixes that?" She sobbed, her hands trembling as she clutched her belly, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Ethan," she choked out. "I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought he was dying. I never meant to hurt you." "But you did," I snapped, my voice rising. "You broke our vows, Emma. You broke me. And now you think a baby erases that? You think I can just forget how you walked out on me without even trying to verify if Mark was telling the truth?" She flinched, her eyes wide with desperation. "I know I messed up," she said, her voice cracking. "But this baby, it's ours, Ethan. Doesn't that mean something? Can't we try again for our child?" I shook my head, the anger boiling over. "No, Emma, you don't get to waltz back in here and act like everything's okay because you're pregnant. You chose Mark. You left me for him. You didn't even care enough to dig deeper into his story. You just believed him and walked out on us." She tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled back, stepping away. "I can't trust you," I said, my voice low but firm. "I'll be there for our kid. I'll be the best dad I can be. But we're done. You made your choice." Emma's face crumpled, but I wasn't done. The betrayal, the lies, the way she'd thrown away our marriage, it was too much. And Mark, I wasn't letting him off the hook either. He'd played us both, manipulated Emma, and destroyed my life in the process. If he thought he could just walk away from this, he had another thing coming. I grabbed my phone, my hands still shaking with rage, and opened Instagram. I typed out a post, spilling everything. The fake cancer, the manipulation, the way he destroyed my marriage just to win Emma back, only to dump her for another woman. I tagged Mark, his new girlfriend Jessica, and anyone else I could think of who might know him. His co-workers, his friends, even his sister who'd spilled the truth to Emma. I attached a screenshot of the fake medical report Emma had shown me, the one Mark had bragged about forging with his hospital buddy. I hit post, watching the likes and comments flood in almost immediately. It was like watching a wildfire spread. Within an hour, Jessica found out through the post and commented, "Are you serious? We're done, Mark." His company caught wind of his lies about needing medical leave. Someone tagged his boss, and by the next morning, he was fired. His sister posted a public apology on my post, saying their family was horrified and had no idea what he'd done. Mark's life imploded in real time, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a grim satisfaction watching it happen. Karma came fast and hard, and he deserved every second of it. But Emma, she wouldn't let it go. She kept pleading, saying she'd made a mistake, that she'd never forgive herself, that we could go to couples counseling, that she'd spend the rest of her life making it up to me. She even said she still had her wedding ring and wore it sometimes when she missed me, like that was supposed to mean something to me now.
I laughed, a bitter, hollow laugh that made her flinch again. "Counseling?" I said, my voice dripping with disbelief. "Emma, you need therapy for yourself, not for us. You need to figure out why you were so quick to throw away our marriage for a liar. You need to work on you before you even think about being with anyone." She started crying harder, doing that thing where she looks at the ceiling to hide her tears. She always did that during sad movies too. She said I was being cruel, but I didn't care. "Cruel?" I shot back. "Cruel is leaving your husband of 3 months for your ex without even questioning his story. Cruel is thinking I'd just take you back after all of this." I told her we'd figure out co-parenting, I'd be there for our kid, no question, but there was no us anymore. The guy she married died the day she chose Mark. I was someone else now, someone who'd been burned too badly to ever trust her again. She left after that, still crying, saying she'd prove herself to me somehow. I didn't respond, just closed the door and sat back down with Max, trying to wrap my head around the fact that I was going to be a dad, whether I was ready for it or not. But I also knew that I wasn't alone anymore. Amy deserved to know the truth, and I owed it to her to be honest. I decided I'd tell her the next day, hoping she'd understand, hoping she'd stick around despite the mess my life had become. But before I could even process that, I got a notification on my phone, a message from Mark himself. He'd seen my post and he was pissed. "You're gonna regret this, Ethan," his message read. "You think you can ruin my life and get away with it?"
I stared at the message, my blood boiling all over again. Ruin his life? He'd destroyed mine first. I wasn't about to let him threaten me after everything he'd done. I replied, "Bring it on, Mark. You've already lost everything. What else you got?" I hit send, my hand shaking with a mix of anger and adrenaline. Then I called Phil, filling him in on everything that had just gone down. He was as shocked as I was, but he had my back. "Dude, you need to watch your back," he said. "Mark sounds unhinged. And Emma, what are you going to do about her?" I didn't have an answer yet. I knew I'd be there for my kid, no question about that. But beyond that, I was lost. Mark's message felt like a storm brewing on the horizon. and I had a bad feeling this wasn't over. I'd exposed him, and now he was out for blood. But I wasn't backing down, not after what he'd done to me, to Emma, to our unborn child. If he wanted a fight, he'd get one. I'm Ethan, a 30-year-old project manager from Seattle, Washington, and the fallout from Emma's betrayal had left me reeling in a storm of anger, pain, and uncertainty. It was the night of May 26, 2025, and after exposing Mark's fake cancer scheme on Instagram, his life had imploded. His girlfriend Jessica dumped him, his company fired him, and his family disowned him. Karma had hit him hard, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a twisted sense of justice watching it all unfold. But Emma's pleas for forgiveness, the reality of her pregnancy with my child, and Mark's threatening message had thrown my life into chaos all over again. I sat on my couch with Max, my loyal lab mix, staring at Mark's message on my phone. "You're gonna regret this, Ethan. You think you can ruin my life and get away with it?" My blood boiled. Ruin his life? He'd destroyed mine first, manipulated Emma, shattered our marriage, and now had the audacity to threaten me? I'd replied, "Bring it on, Mark." But as the adrenaline faded, a cold dread settled in. What was he capable of? I'd exposed him publicly, and now he was out for blood. I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. I barely slept that night, my mind racing with everything that had happened. Emma's tear-streaked face kept flashing in my head, her desperate pleas to try again, her hand on her belly, carrying my child. I was going to be a dad, a fact that hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd always wanted kids. Emma and I had talked about it during our 5 years together, dreaming of a little boy or girl running around a big backyard in the suburbs. But not like this. Not with a woman who'd betrayed me, who'd chosen her ex over me without a second thought, who'd only come back because Mark's lie fell apart. The next morning, May 27th, 2025, I woke up to a flood of notifications on my phone. My Instagram post exposing Mark had gone viral. Friends, acquaintances, even strangers were sharing it, commenting with shock and outrage. "Disgusting," one person wrote. "What kind of monster fakes cancer to break up a marriage?" another said. Mark's sister had posted a follow-up, saying their family had cut him off completely, that they were ashamed to be related to him. Jessica had messaged me directly, thanking me for exposing the truth. She'd had no idea about Mark's lies and was heartbroken, but relieved to know before moving to California with him. But the comments weren't all about Mark. Some were directed at Emma. How could she leave her husband like that? Sounds like she wanted an excuse to go back to her ex. I'd never forgive her if I were Ethan. Reading those hit hard. They echoed the thoughts I'd been wrestling with since Emma showed up pregnant. I knew I'd be there for our kid, but every time I thought about co-parenting with her, my stomach twisted. How could I share a child with someone who'd hurt me so deeply? Emma texted me that morning, a long message apologizing again, saying she'd started looking into therapy, that she'd do whatever it took to rebuild my trust. She even suggested we meet with a mediator to discuss co-parenting plans, offering to let me be at every doctor's appointment, every ultrasound. "I just want to do this right, Ethan," she wrote. "I know I messed up, but I want to be a good mom, and I want you to be part of this." I didn't respond. I couldn't, not yet. I needed time to process, to figure out how to navigate this new reality. I was excited to be a dad, despite everything. But the idea of being tied to Emma for the rest of my life through our child felt like a life sentence. Every time I thought about her, I saw the moment she walked out our door, choosing Mark over me, and the pain came rushing back. Mark, meanwhile, was a ticking time bomb. After his threatening message, I'd called Phil, who'd urged me to be careful. I decided to file a police report that morning, just to cover my bases. I drove to the Seattle PD precinct in Capitol Hill, explained the situation, and showed them Mark's message.
The officer took it seriously, saying they'd keep an eye on him, but warned me to stay vigilant. Guys like Mark, who'd lost everything, could be unpredictable. I left the station feeling a little better, but the unease lingered.
When I got home, I finally worked up the courage to call Amy. She'd been nothing but amazing since we started dating. Supportive, funny, drama-free. I knew I had to tell her the truth, even if it meant risking whatever we were building. I asked her to meet me at a coffee shop in Fremont, a cozy spot we'd been to a few times before. She showed up looking as gorgeous as ever, her gym bag slung over her shoulder. She'd just finished teaching a class. I took a deep breath and laid it all out. Emma's return, the pregnancy, the fact that it was my child, Mark's fake illness, everything. Amy listened quietly, her expression unreadable, sipping her latte as I stumbled through the story. When I finished, I braced myself for her to walk away. I wouldn't have blamed her. Who'd want to deal with this kind of baggage so early in a relationship? But she surprised me. "Ethan," she said, setting her cup down, "that's a lot. I'm not gonna lie, it's messy. But I'm not the kind of person who runs from messy. I like you, and I'm willing to see where this goes, as long as you're honest with me." She paused, then added, "But you need to figure out what you want. With Emma, with the baby, with all of it. I'm not here to be a rebound or a distraction."
I nodded, grateful beyond words. "I don't want you to be a rebound, Amy," I said. I don't know how to navigate this yet, but I promise I'll be upfront with you, always." She gave me a small smile, squeezed my hand, and said, "Let's take it one day at a time." I left the coffee shop feeling a flicker of hope. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought. Meanwhile, Emma was struggling. Phil, who still had some mutual friends with her, told me she'd been a wreck since coming back. She'd taken a leave from her nursing job at Seattle Children's Hospital, overwhelmed by the stress of the pregnancy and the fallout with Mark. She'd moved into a small apartment in Ravenna, trying to piece her life back together, but the guilt was eating her alive. She'd even reached out to Mark's sister, apologizing for her role in believing his lies, but the sister had shut her down, saying, "You should have known better." Mark, on the other hand, was spiraling. Phil heard through the grapevine that he'd tried to salvage things with Jessica, but she'd blocked him on everything and moved to California without him. His company had blacklisted him in the industry. Turns out, faking a medical leave doesn't look great on a resume. He'd even tried to confront me directly, showing up at my office building in downtown Seattle that afternoon, but security turned him away after I'd warned them about the police report. He'd left a note with the front desk, though. Just one line: "This isn't over, Ethan." I handed it over to the police, but the threat hung over me like a dark cloud. By the end of that day, May 27, 2025, I was exhausted. Emotionally, mentally, physically. I sat in my living room with Max, staring at the paternity test Emma had left behind, the reality of fatherhood sinking in. I wanted to be excited, I really did, but the pain of Emma's betrayal, the fear of Mark's next move, and the uncertainty of my future with Amy made it hard to feel anything but dread. Everything I'd built, my marriage, my trust, my dreams, had been torn apart, and I didn't know how to start over.
I'm Ethan, a 30-year-old project manager from Seattle, Washington, and the last few months have been a roller coaster of betrayal, heartbreak, and hard truths that I'll carry with me for the rest of my life. It's the evening of May 27, 2025, and I'm sitting on my back porch with Max, my loyal lab mix, watching the sun dip below the Seattle skyline. The air's warm, the sky streaked with oranges and pinks, but there's a heaviness in my chest that hasn't lifted since yesterday. Since Emma walked back into my life, 14 weeks pregnant with my child, and revealed the sick truth about Mark's fake cancer scheme.
I've spent the last 24 hours trying to wrap my head around it all. Mark's lies, exposed for the world to see on Instagram, have cost him everything. His girlfriend, his job, his family's respect. He's a pariah now, a man who faked a terminal illness to manipulate my wife into leaving me, only to toss her aside for another woman when he got what he wanted. His threatening message still lingers in my mind. This isn't over, Ethan. But I've got the police on my side, and I'm ready to face whatever he throws my way. He's already lost. I made sure of that.
Emma, on the other hand, is a different kind of pain. She's carrying my child, a child I'll love and protect with everything I have. But every time I think about her, I see the moment she chose Mark over me, the moment she walked out our door without even trying to verify his story. Her betrayal cut deeper than I can put into words. She's trying to make amends, starting therapy, offering to let me be at every doctor's appointment, but I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust her again. Co-parenting with her feels like a daunting road ahead, but I'll do it for our kid. I have to. Then there's Amy, the one bright spot in this mess. She didn't run when I told her the truth about Emma and the baby. She stayed, willing to take things one day at a time. I don't know where our relationship will go, but her support has given me a glimmer of hope that I can rebuild, that I can find happiness again, even after all this pain. Sitting here on my porch, Max's head resting on my lap, I can't help but reflect on what this whole ordeal has taught me. Trust is fragile. Once it's broken, it's nearly impossible to piece back together. Emma's choice to believe Mark without question showed me how quickly love can be thrown away, how easily someone can turn their back on the life you built together. Mark's deception taught me that some people will go to unimaginable lengths to get what they want, even if it means destroying others in the process.
I lost everything, I whisper to Max, my voice breaking as I stroke his fur. All because I trusted someone who didn't value me. It's a truth that cuts deep, a lesson carved into my soul with the sharp edge of betrayal. Love isn't enough if it's not backed by loyalty, by honesty, by the willingness to fight for what matters. I'm trying to move forward, to be the man I want my child to look up to, a man who doesn't let pain define him, who can rise above betrayal and build a better future. It's not easy, and some days the hurt feels as fresh as it did the day Emma walked out. But I owe it to myself, to my kid, to Amy, to keep going. Thanks for listening to my story, y'all. It's been a rough ride, one I'll never forget, one I hope you'll learn from too. I've laid it all out there, the betrayal, the lies, the heartbreak, and the fight to find my way back. Subscribe to my channel for more raw, real stories that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. Drop a comment below. Have you ever been blindsided by a betrayal that changed your life? I'd love to hear your stories. Hit that bell so you don't miss what's next, and I'll see you soon. Stay tuned for more secrets, more drama, and karma coming to settle the score.